Kia ora, ka te titi, ka tangi kaka, ka tangi te hoki ahau. Tēnara tātou katoa e rā, e ngā whare tapu o ngā kaunihira rohe o Waikirikiri, mahara mai. Tēnā koe Sam, kura matua, tēnā koe kaunihira, rohe, councillors, and our kaimahi staff, managers, tēnā katoa. I will begin the hui Finance and Performance Committee hui 23rd of August 2023 with our karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mākina kina ki uta, kia mātaratara ki tai. E hi āti ana te atakura, he tino, he huka, he hauhu, tihei mauni ora. Tēnā koe everybody. Thank you very much. Identification of extraordinary business. Apologies. Oh, sorry, apologies first. I have apologies from Sophie, Councillor Reid, and Councillor Councillor Sophie McInnes. Apologies, and Bob Mugford. Yes,
and
thank
Phil
you.
Dean.
And Councillor Phil Dean. I'm happy to move those. Do I have a seconder? Kura matua Sam, second. Thank you. Identification of extraordinary business. I haven't been expert. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I have been. Yeah. Sorry. Going back to the apologies. I have moved it. Sam has seconded it. Those in favour say aye. Those against, there being none, carried. Thank you. Thank you, Kelvin. Identification of extraordinary business. I haven't been informed of any. There is none. Moving along, conflicts of interest.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Hassan.
Tab 14 NPX.
Happy with that? Tab 14 PX, Councillor Hassan has a conflict of interest and will be stepping
Aside.
aside. Thank you. Public forum. There being none. Thank you. Moving along to the confirmation of minutes. Public minutes. Hoping everyone has had a chance to read through those and looking for a mover and a seconder for these minutes. Thank you, Councillor Lyle, and seconded Councillor Glidden. I have a question from Councillor Miller.
Page 7. I just wonder whether that was the minuting is Councillor Glidden asked Mr. Mason whether he was comfortable with Council's financial position and whether he had concerns for the next 12 months. Mr. Mason said Council had a good, healthy debt. Just wonder that maybe written a better way. It almost sounds like we've got a large lump of debt size rather than we're managing our debt in a conservative or financially responsible way. Just maybe an amendment there, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Miller.
Mr. Mason might do that.
Would you like to respond with an amendment of words there?
Yeah,
Kelvin?
that's fine. We have it's a healthy, I think from memory, I think we talked about a healthy balance sheet. And we just talked about the other headwinds, but yeah.
Are you happy with the answer?
Yeah.
Councillor? Thank you. We have the mover and the seconder. Those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Those against, being none, carried. Oh, sorry. Question, Councillor Hassan, got your light on there.
Oh, sorry.
There being none, that confirmation of public minutes is moved. Next tab is the committee terms of reference for information. Moving to tab 6, chairperson's report. I'm not too sure if I want to keep saying that I'll take the report as read, but really it's just if anybody has any questions regarding the report, I guess I'd like to highlight initially, Sam, your successful elections as President of Local Government NZ. I think it's a fantastic for our district that you continue to represent not only our district, but now our country and local government NZ, and a huge benefit to not only council here, but everyone in New Zealand. So, tō and kia ora. Thank you. Are there any questions regarding my report to anybody, councillors? I'm happy to move my report unless there's and looking for a seconder. Councillor Miller, second. Any questions? Those in favour say aye. Those against, None. Carried. Thank you. Executive Director Enabling Services Report, tab 7.
It's a mouthful, isn't it?
Mhm.
Right, I'll just want to highlight a couple of key agenda items today. So we've got some monitoring reports around our financial performance, noting we're at the end of the financial year, and a review of our significant projects. We'll have an update on some of the details around the long-term plan and activity to come forward, and then public excluded. We had a couple of matters around some acquisition of land and a CCO report. But I wanted to draw your attention to the Health Hub. We've been really making great progress with Te Whatu Ora around an expression of interest to go out to attract providers of general practice services. We're in the process of finalising that document. And once we have that finalised, of course, we'll circulate that around. The process will take around about 4 weeks until we've received the expressions of interest. And from that point, we'll work collaboratively with Te Whatu Ora around assessing the right provider or providers so that they meet the interests of both parties. So we are truly in partnership on this one. The lease will, of course, be with us, not with Te Whatu Ora, but it'll be... we want to be so strongly in partnership with a view for future other opportunities. Early engagement around LTP has kicked off. We went through a workshop last week or the week prior around what the charrettes would look like. They've had completed 3 to date. They've been really successful, and we'll have some insights coming from those shortly around what's going on. And a couple of the huianas have also been undertaken. And they've been really useful because we've been able to really focus on specific groups of the community. Just wanted to touch on some strategic activity going on at the moment, and this is really to set some frames in place to enable us to move forward through the LTP. And there's a mix of internal and external focused frameworks and strategies that we're working on. And 3 areas referred to here as one is direction and performance. And so this is about having strategic and performance frameworks to enable us to make good decisions around the governance table, and also then good decisions that flow off that by management. And the performance piece is making sure that our staff are all heading in the one direction to enable us to get the most out of what we put in. So we have a limited finite resource, and we want to use that as appropriately and effectively as possible. The second one, which you'll be pleased to hear about, is the investment in commercial strategies, and the Sharon Nusier has spoken to you about a draft. Will be back around December, but of course there'll be workshops on the way through that. And one of the really interesting and encouraging things, we're looking to have a workshop day with business owners, leaders from the community and future potential people in the community from an economic development point of view, to get a broader view than what traditionally may occur in some councils, where it's quite an inwardly focus of what we think we know. So we're really wanting to open this up and have really good engagement. So that will be a key part in sort of influencing this, but also more our economic development strategy. And the final string to this bow here is around our digital future. And we've talked previously, there may have been an audit risk committee about the digital strategy, so we'll undertake a refresh of that and looking to ensure that we've got the right activity going into the long-term plan to fund what we need for the future of the community around digital and digital services. I will leave it there and take questions.
Councillors, are there any questions relating to the report? No, there don't seem to be any questions. Kelvin, I just had a question around some of the commending the team for the charrettes process at the moment, and some of the what are some of the key questions that they're asking the community at the moment? Is there one or two that sort of stand out? And you've spoken about strategic alignment, and I think that's great because that's certainly what we need moving forward, that alignment, governance and a council key to performance. I just wanted to thank Shay and the economic development team for reaching out to the business community of Leeston in the rural areas there. It was a really great day and a really great response. So commending efforts to engage the wider business community, have a good health check, a pulse check on that sector. Thank you.
In terms of the outcome of the charrettes, it's there's been some early insight, but I'd kind of like to hold that until we have it more rounded. Otherwise, it's sort of going down a path that potentially is not the overall view of the community.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah, as you were just touching on then the charrettes and the Huiana, like we saw when we went to Leeston, and Shane and I just referring to the business community, we saw some really productive comments coming through that loud and clear. Just wanting to know how you gather the people in to do the charrettes in Huiana. I haven't seen the dates on that, but does it give are you getting business people? Are you getting farmers? Are you getting a really good mix, health workers, etc., rather than just sort of people who are looking to do this because they're maybe politically active?
Yeah, so we had Research First as our support partner on this, and so what they do is they go across and ask for people who are interested, but they're also very keen on the backgrounds and where they come from, what they do, what their cultural backgrounds are, all of that, to make sure we get a representation of what the community looks like. So they use a lot of the statistics figures to start with to make sure the representation of those on those customer groups, for a better term, are made up. So it's not just people putting their hands up and say, I'd like to do this. Those will come when we have the next piece, will be around some surveys where it opens it up even broader. So hence why I'm sort of reluctant at this point to talk about findings, because we haven't got a full view of the community.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou. Yes, Sam.
Yeah, thank you for the report. My question is just around the strategic activity that's highlighted here, and there's lots of different bits that are going on at the moment. Is there a plan that we can just see, like a calendar that sort of maps out where each of these pieces of work is at and when we can expect councillors to be a part of the decision-making piece? As between now and Christmas, there'll be discussions on future Selwyn, on the LTP, on the investment strategy, and they might be separate than one another rather than, or they might be on the same day. I'm just not sure the plan of how the engagement is going to be.
Yeah, it's a good point, Sam. And what I intend, we'll have a strategic framework which is being developed right at this moment, which will pull through those key tenets of what we need to look at, and then it'll be a prioritisation of what needs to come when. But there's a hell of a lot of activity that needs to happen before LTP. So yeah, we'll get something to you shortly on that.
Cool. And if you can just ensure it's in everyone's diary.
Yes, most definitely. Yep.
Cool. Thank you.
All right, any other questions? Any other questions? No, then being none, I'm happy to, do I have a mover and a seconder for that report? Councillor Elizabeth Munt, and seconded by Sam. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? None. Carried. Thank you. Tab 8, Finance and Performance Report, Kelvin.
Thank you. I'll just preface this with the fact that this is very much draft numbers. They are still subject to change, and there's work going on at the moment around finalising those numbers. So the Audit and Risk Subcommittee will be reviewing the material items around valuation and other big assumptions in the near future. So just want to make sure that caveat's understood. From a net surplus deficit, and this is before vested assets and depreciation and amortization, we are running a little ahead of the plan, so we're up 5.5. Capital expenditures has continued our traditional trajectory of being 75% spent and having a variance of 28.7 underspent. In terms of LIMS, I noted last meeting that they were back on track, and it may have just been a timing aspect around that, where We got them back under the 10-day position on the 13th of June. And since then, we've been compliant all the way through. And just of note, that the last quarter was the busiest quarter we've had in the last 2 to 3 years. So we're seeing a lot more properties in the Selwyn area changing hands. So probably the balance between developer and properties changing hands is sort of moving around a little bit. Back to where I was here. So in terms of building consents, yes, in the month at 90%, so still not quite at the 100%, but it is certainly on the improve. Numbers have been down a little in terms of building consents, but it's still, sometimes it just takes a little bit more time to get these done when we're chasing information and the challenges around peaks and troughs of dealing with those. Council facilities numbers through the doors are all looking great and well and truly exceeded the targets. If we move to page 25 and looking at the income there, you can see as we've had all year, the major performer above budget has been development contributions, and which you'll expect given the growth we're having in the district. On the cost side, we've faced some fairly stiff headwinds in terms of transport, where the cost of undertaking transport works has been significantly higher, and we're also cleaning up repairs around flood events early in the year. The consulting and contracting expenditure, that too is up. A couple of factors on that is we've been outsourcing some of the resource consents, so we do see a little bit of an uptick on their revenue from those, so partially offsets. And the other area where there's been some offset, but not all, has been around staff related, where we've used consultants instead of staff at times. Moving on through to the capital program, which is on page, what's my page numbers now? 28. Thank you. As I said, we're down 28 odd million there compared with budget. There is a substantial amount of carry forwards, as we all know, going into next year, which will again put some pressure on next year's budget. But we are looking at ways that of our planning processes moving forward to ensure that that's better managed. Balance sheet remains in reasonably good shape. There has been some additional borrowings in the quarter, but it remains strong. Performance metrics, really the key ones there have been around our resource consent and the issue of consents and compliance there have been below target and a little below on the community centres, and remembering the larger centres have been bringing in a higher proportion of revenue than what was planned, and therefore offsetting some of that overall issues with smaller facilities, but they are under review. So I'm happy to take questions.
Councillors.
Well,
Councillor Hassan.
thank you. Just with regards to where are we? Page 26, consulting and professional fees. And we see that they're unfavourable to budget by 3.1 million due to increased costs relating to building and resource consent processing. Are we planning on recovering? How are we planning on recovering that unfavourable budget? Is it going to be by increasing fees because we're using external consultants, to the process or to the applicants?
Yes, there's a mix of items sitting in that consulting and professional fees. Where they're related to building consenting activity, we recover those costs directly, so it's a direct pass through, so we should be recovering most of that, although there's an element of admin that goes in there which won't be and gets picked up by the general rate. And then there's another legal audit and other consulting in there, and as we've talked about previously in other committees, the audit fee is greater than planned in terms of what the reality was, so there's a an item there which will get passed to the ratepayer, unfortunately, but we've received a proposal letter for this upcoming year's audit, which is significantly above what we've planned, and we've responded to Audit New Zealand with we want a bit more clarity around why this is, and we're not the only council who are facing the same problems.
Do we need a policy? Sorry, my next question. Do we need a policy around expenditure and external consultants and the use and cost of them? If they're going to be a cost to our ratepayers? Is there a cap that we can operate under to manage this process?
You could do that. The issue you'll have with that is we won't be able to deliver everything you want. So unavoidable legal fees that come up, things where we need to deal with items. If we were to put a cap on such activity, we run the risk that we expose ourselves somewhere else. It's unfortunate that we are in this position this year, and we're looking at through the budget to make sure it's better. But as I said, like audit fees, unusually the auditors set those after our plan. We don't have too much option after that point.
Okay. And my last question, and I think you might have partially answered this because I contacted you. Page 31, we've got resource consents and building consents. They're in a negative, and I just wondered why they're in a negative when we've got a slowdown in our building and consenting processes.
Yeah, it's a
resource consent.
good question. The slowdown's been more near term than through the whole financial year. So start of the year, we're still going fairly strongly in that factor, and there was still a lot of consenting come through. Yes, it has slowed down, and that's hence why the numbers month on month, as I said before, I think the building consent one was at 90%, which is probably as high as we've seen it for some time. So yeah, looking on a year-to-date basis, some early months which were down. I think I'm just guessing on numbers here, so I won't say, but in the low 30s to 50%, it's where you're seeing the drag for the first half of the year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Heston. Councillor Miller.
I've got a number of questions, but we might just trundle through them if we can. On page 25, I guess just looking at our OPEX that's the cost to run the business on a day-to-day basis. But if you look at the income side of our statement, we've got 9.6 or nearly $10 million of DCs, which for long-term infrastructure investment. So you take that out, we're actually running at about a $5 million deficit in OPEX, aren't we, really, realistically? And so maybe a ratepayer readiness would assume that actually things are looking pretty rosy here, but we've actually, in real terms, we've got a deficit of $5 million, which we need to fund through our rating base. And I suppose the question, one of the things that is not clear to me is OPEX projects. It's an underspend, but what makes up OPEX projects, Kelvin? Quite a chunky number there.
It is a chunky number, and it's where projects of high significance for business areas are grouped together.
Like digital transformation or something like that, is it?
Yeah, things like that. Or it could be just thinking of examples here. It may be that we're doing something with digital design. We may want to capture, ring fence those costs and pull them together. What we are looking to implement is an addition to the finance system, which will allow us to report both through a GL sort of line where it's description of expenditure and projects. So we'll have a much clearer understanding of where the costs are going.
So where I was leading to with that question about us really being in a deficit for OPEX and the effect on rating was, we've only delivered about 75% of our CapEx spend. Have we rated anticipating we would deliver 100%? Because if we have and we haven't delivered that, obviously that we should have further over income, or we should have more income than we've actually required to spend. So it could potentially make our real position worse. You get what I'm sort of saying?
Yeah. So the capital spend will not flow through this statement.
The interest cost will, though.
The interest cost and
so it's another 30. If we spend another 30 million, potentially we've got another $1.5 million to $2 million of interest expense. It's not included on here.
Yes, and of course that's it. spread over 30 years, the capital, and you got the interest cost on it. Yes, that would push that up. The way we rate for that is it would be a one year differential on that, and it pushes forward. So the theory that we've got carry forward projects, they've been included in the rating calculation for that year. They push forward into the next year, and they are excluded from the rating calculation for that year. So we've already rated for the year. It pushes on through.
Yeah, I hear what
Yeah.
you're saying. So on that basis, we should have a $1.5 million over collection, shouldn't we? Because we haven't borrowed that 30 million that we were anticipating borrowing.
Yeah, that's right.
It doesn't show up on our accounts, does it? So that should-
No, there's the other counter factor is around our interest rates being higher, which is saving us a little bit on not having spent as much and drawn down as much debt. But yes, I know what you're meaning.
So realistically, we're looking at significant pressure on our rates before we even start the new rating year in that case. Just looking on page 27, wastewater had a surplus variance of 6.11 million. So is that actually a surplus which allows us to put that into capital expenditure?
No, so that goes back to what you were saying before around. So in effect, yes, because all of that surplus is being generated through development contributions.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the question that arises in my mind is, if we've developed the surplus, should we advance our CapEx spend to take, spend it in today's dollars rather than defer it to 5, 6 years, 7 years old when $6 million of CapEx is worth less delivery?
Yeah, looking at wastewater, we've been aggressive on our capital program there. We've
Yeah.
dragged quite a bit forward, given we want to leave, should a 3 waters or 10 waters occur, we want to ensure that we've got ourselves in a good position for our ratepayers.
Page 28, somewhere along there, your numbers don't add up because the two CapEx and budget, and the CapEx and budget in both lines have got different variations. It must be a error somewhere in the end.
Yeah, that's noted.
Can you let me know what our working capital requirements are? We seem to have a lot of cash. No, I think I brought it up last time, sloshing around. We only make 2 payment runs a month, don't we? Can't we have the less of our money sitting there in working capital? Is it what working capital requirements do we have as a business that we need to have that much cash sitting in?
Yeah, it's really balancing and looking at when the cash flows arise, and so rating is the largest one that comes through. So we want to make sure that we have a high enough balance when that cash has come in to use it. If we were to put that on call, it would still be in the same category, so it'd still show in that space.
That was my question: are we actively managing our balances given the interest rates now that everything's on call until required for the payment runs, like we are actively in every single penny?
That's right. Yeah.
Sorry, do you mind if I carry on, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, absolutely.
On the same page, we're talking about our total debt load there, of borrowing. What would be helpful, and it may be at a high level, is a pie graph just on what parts of the business that the debt is actually allocated to. So is it in roading, is it in community services, and even a bit of a line graph showing the progression over time, because we've only got a 1 year comparator here, so we're not getting comparators about where we're going in that sort of.
Yeah, okay. That's a good point, and we'll add that to it. Just for insight, over 50% of that is water related.
Right. Okay. This is a bit of a pedantic one, but page 30, talking about some of the community services, percentage of overall rates and dog registration payments made at library or council service centres, 45%. I'm just wondering why we're so proud of that. I thought we'd be trying to get digital, and maybe it's that metric maybe wanted a bit of review.
Yeah, these metrics come directly out of last LTP, so we are in the process of reviewing those and streamlining them to make them more meaningful and more appropriate. So what it may mean is the metric will still hang around, but it'll hang around in the operation of the business, so to enable the business areas to focus. But it's a bit like number of ratepayers receiving a physical rates bill. I want to reduce that as much as I can to move it digitally.
Okay, that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Miller. Councillor
Thanks, Calvin. I might have some questions that are too curly, and you're welcome to get back to me on that. So we've talked in the past about if ratepayers can't actually manage the rates bills, and we talked about how there's a caveat that can be put on a home, and that's something that can be chosen by the ratepayer, and the option to go into a reverse mortgage. Well, obviously the caveat is probably not a choice, but the reverse mortgage is an option under some circumstances. So my question is, what happens if council defaults on the rates if the recession hits hard and the ratepayers owing aren't able to come through with their rate payments? What is the collateral for our debts, please? And are our property rights protected if defaulting occurs? And I think probably what's happened in the Esk Valley probably highlights the fact that people are really concerned now. What I was concerned post Esk Valley, and I'm clearly not the only one because I'm receiving those kind of emails from my constituents now. So people want to know these kind of answers to these questions about private property rights, and you know what happens in these situations, and what is the collateral to our debts. Thanks.
Okay. A few different circumstances tied up there together. So if I address the Esk Valley piece, and we'll say earthquakes and various other things, when a home becomes inhabitable, yeah, that's the one, can't live in it. There is a remission on the rates, and it comes back to the rates being purely the land component of it. And I would think under circumstances where the land couldn't even be used, to be further remissions. So we undertook remissions, I understand, during the earthquakes where properties were unable to be used. In terms of unable to pay for rates, we talked about a postponement policy where in effect it's a reverse mortgage. We've had very, very limited uptake. I'm talking a handful at most. And generally the conditions around that are quite tight, of course, because it's something that could have sit on our balance sheet for quite some time. In terms of failure to pay rates and unable to pay rates, there's a process around the collection of that. And unfortunately, the last piece of that is we would go to the ratepayers bank if they hold a mortgage, and the bank will pay us the rates and their mortgage will be increased, and then it becomes a question with the bank and the ratepayer around ability to service the debt. In a circumstance where a ratepayer does not have a mortgage, that's when we would consider debt collection and how that might work. But that's sort of the last place we go, and we explore every other opportunity before that. We have a lot of ratepayers who enter into payment plans and various things like that. So yeah, intention is to be able to recover the rates because that's supporting the rest of the ratepayers in the district, but it's also having that humanistic side where we're focused on making sure that people get through things.
Thank you very much, Kelvin. Happy with that answer?
Yeah. I mean, just I'm talking worst case scenario, you know, say 1930s recession scenario. In that case, if we as a council can't pay our rates, what's the result on that? Because you're talking about getting money somehow from the ratepayer. I'm saying if that scenario isn't an option and we're defaulting as a council, what happens to us as a council?
Well, that's where we probably going back.
Yes.
Look for another job.
Well, yeah,
Thank you very much, Councillor Munt. If you want to, would you like to reply?
you know, if you roll that forward, yeah, sort of what Grant was saying there around you have unders and overs in expenditure where times are a bit tougher and times are a bit easier. So generally have a fairly strong revenue stream coming through because of the ratepayers. For us to be in a situation where we would have to default would be incredibly rare and incredibly unusual, and I'm not sure if there has been a council in New Zealand who's ever got into that position. There would be mechanisms that would occur at a higher level which would sort that out. So the
Government steps in, you mean?
well, it wouldn't necessarily step in, but
I think
the
perhaps.
funding organisations would enable us to borrow. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Munt. I do appreciate your questions, and certainly brings the public interest into the conversation. So I appreciate that. Sam?
It's just information around an answer to that question. And LGNZ is currently working on a ratepayer assistance scheme and has been talking with the metro councils of the country to be shareholders in that along with the government to set up a borrowing opportunity at rates similar to the local government funding agency that councils can access. And the thought behind it is that it would enable anyone to borrow money at low interest costs to be able to pay councils for whatever the costs are. So that might be development contributions, it might be reverse mortgages, it might be, instead of needing money from the bank, it just adds to the things Kelvin was saying and provides another opportunity for people to pay council costs. And that's still in its infancy. We're currently talking with the government about them buying into that and being a part of that solution. And so far, both major parties are signalling positive signals around trying to get that across the line because they can see the benefit that the LGFA has had for councils and want to provide that for New Zealand public.
Thank you very much, Sam. Appreciate that. Councillor Miller.
I was going to ask a question later on, but seeing we're on rates, it might be more appropriate now. Just as we've passed all the district plan proposals and some winners and some losers, there's been a number of people that have asked me the question I haven't known the answer is, if your land has been valued by Valuation New Zealand as potentially being subdivisionable and you've been rated for that number and then you found out now that it's been turned down, are you still required to pay that amount on your rates bill? I noticed, I think Waimakariri came up with sort of a pretty novel solution that if you paid your original rates bill, and if you didn't get subdivided in the next 5 years, that's what you carried on at. But have we had time to consider that for our district, Kelvin, because there will be a number of properties caught by that who were valued as being potentially divisible?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, Grant. It's yes, we have, and we've had a couple of challenges to the valuation process that's undertaken by QV, and what even to the extent that it's reached court. What we do there is we will look at the QV will go out and revalue based on what the new information is. That will create a new value, and the rates are accordingly adjusted to reflect that. Yeah, most of these most ones have been tied up have been through private plan changes as opposed to the district plan. But there's one little sticking point with the WIMAC piece, and that is you can't pay your old rates bill because there's been a valuation piece undertaken. So it's a sort of an effect of having to get someone like QV to make a assessment. Should have that not been there, what would have the value been to enable you then to set it? Yeah. It's certainly on the agenda for the RTP to put that sort of process in place. Yeah.
Sorry, just
Councillor Hassan. Yep.
briefly on that. That also covers people who are adjacent to these private plan change requests that also experienced hikes in their rating values, even though they weren't part of the plan changes.
Yeah, and it would come back to a reassessment by QV on that value. Yeah.
Just one other quick question. It's around the DCs. What's the default? Do we have a default payment on our DCs by any of our developers?
Currently no. And that'll be part of the year-end review is looking at those balances and where they are. We do have, of course, the ability to hold back everything to encourage them to pay is a first way of going about it.
Thank you very much, councillors, and thank you very much, Kelvin, for answering some of those questions. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things that were brought up, and it's been brought up a couple of times now, and it's around DCs and the revenue collected by DCs and what does the future hold. Perhaps, and Grant's raised it, around perhaps there could be some simple tweaks done to the reporting to enable a deeper assessment. There is a question on one of the areas here, Kelvin, regarding page 26, I think it is, what work is going on into identifying and consolidating unidentified costs. So there seems to be, as Grant's alluded to or pointed out, that transparency in the reporting that allows for some of these more sticky costs. Is that achievable?
What are you referring to as unidentifiable costs?
Page 26. Where is it? Financing costs. Sorry, I've missed my. There is a piece here that there's an unidentified costs, so Kelvin, and it's. I'll have to get back to you on that. Sorry, I've missed my notes here. And I just had, sorry to continue this on, but I just had a couple of questions on the Reconnect. We visited the wonderful Reconnect infrastructure last week at the transfer station. I just want to know, does that sit? Is it? Does it? Oh yeah. What do you? I'm asking around where the costs lie for that. The operating costs, they lie in community services or they lie in Rex?
No, in refuse operations.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, well, councillors, do I have a mover and a second for this report? Thank you very much, Sam, and councillor Munt, seconder. Those in favour? Those against? Being none, carried. Moving to the next report, tab 9, major projects report. Welcoming Jenny. Thank you, Jenny. Take it away. Sorry.
Good afternoon. Okay. So first major projects report. So in terms of a summary of what we have in that report, firstly, just want to touch on performance. As you'll see in the report, we achieved 74% of capital spend for the last financial year. For this upcoming year, we'll definitely be looking to improve on that. I've outlined in the report a number of activities that we're focusing on to what I'd say strengthen our performance. From those, there's probably one other aspect that I didn't include that I'd add to that, and that's also looking at how we sequence and program our portfolio as well to make sure that we are getting through the spend that we need to. So I'll just add that one in there. In terms of the major project updates themselves, I'm hoping, well, it's consistent with the property report we would have received 2 weeks ago. Speaking with my colleagues, we had no significant changes in progress from that 2 weeks ago, which I would is consistent with a major project and the amount of work that goes into those. The better off funding. So since this report was written, the Lincoln Town Centre and the cycleways have proposals being prepared on them at the moment. I do have a correction that I need to make in terms of the town centre. We have received $519,000 instead of the $497 that I indicated in the report, and that should be spent by 2027, and I had in there 2024, so I apologise for that. Okay, and in terms of assurance activity, we will be conducting, we've started a post-implementation review on TRRT. That will be presented to this forum on the 25th of October, I think is our next meeting. I had in the report November, but the schedule's been adjusted since then, so we'll be bringing that here. We have done 2 previous project post-implementation reviews, which were on the Southern Sports Centre and the Health Hub across the road. They were presented in audit at risk in earlier forums, but we'll now bring those forward into this forum. So in terms of a post-implementation review, what we're really looking for is it's not an audit of the projects, it's really more of a project deep dive. It's internally run, we do them internally, and it's around looking at projects, how well they performed, how well we've transitioned them into operations, what we've learnt from that and what we need to put into our frameworks and how we run our projects moving forward. So that's sort of focusing on that for the post-implementation reviews. Sorry, that's the narrative that I had to support the
Thank you very much, Jenny.
report.
Awesome. Councillors, are there any questions?
Yep.
Councillor Reid, please.
Oh, Deborah was first.
Councillor Deborah
One too quick.
was first. Yep.
Hey, page 39, Waihora Whātara.
Yes.
I note that we have finished the community engagement And we're now sitting on a budget of just under 10 million. Or the forecasted budget, we're up to 1.53. Can you give us an idea of what is included in this building? How's it planned to be designed? Is it what was shown to us? Just trying to understand where we were at, because the last report had a considerable variance in the budget, shall we say, and the limitation was questioned about the design of the particular building and its future uses. So I just want to understand where are we at with that process.
Thank you, Councillor Hassan.
So where we are on that is at the last, I'm sure if it was a council meeting or a workshop, which it was, but we discussed the options around the future. The executive team has recently received a further update on where that's heading and what's occurring. With Sharon being new on board, she's asked a few additional questions, which the team have gone away to look at, and that includes a standard design for facilities, which has a core standard and then some tweaks around the outside. So that work's being undertaken currently, and once we're through that, we'll come back with a more firm view of it, which will roll into the LTP. We're going to be in a position where I think we're going to the sum is larger than what we've been budgeting for in the LTP, so we'll have to go back again into that.
Happy with that, Councillor? Thank you very much. Thank you, Kelvin. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Just with a major projects report, in the past we would, or it was done through Water and Risk or whatever it was, so we got a different colour when it was an update to it, so we could see when was the updates. Do we still doing that?
That was that wasn't the major projects, that was the property report.
Property report. Are we able to have something with this as well? It's hard to tell what is actually new information and what is current has been updated. I've just got a comment to make, and I've said this to you before, Kelvin, is about the Rolleston Reserve development. We had an announcement about the art project going in this week, and it's unfortunate that the funding of that has been lost in the conversation and is turned into, you can see that there's been a number of questions raised about where the money's coming from, but the money was already there, had been allocated for the project, and then extra money that is going to be used for it is coming from SCAPE, is going out to get funding partners for that. So for us, it's a really good news story having the this art project. It should look quite fantastic in the town centre. I'm quite looking forward to seeing it. I was the chair of the Rolleston Residents Association when the money was first available for that, which has been money from reserves and other accounts that have been, and even ones that have been left over from where it at the start of the Selwyn district. So anyway, that's my comment. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reid, and acknowledging your long-term commitment there. Albert, did you have anything to add? Councillors, Elizabeth Munt.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, with the Lincoln Town Centre upgrade, do you have an all-encompassing map of all the stages together, what the final look will look like in completion, and are we able to see that soon? And in terms of the original drawings and the concept design, was that done before Lincoln's development into the two shopping complexes kind of place that it is now? And has there been any upgrades and changes, or could there be a potential for the public to give a feet to that because of the change in nature of the township?
I think with the Lincoln Town Centre, that's something that will be looked at for the wider project as part of the LTP, so that council will be able to see that as part of the wider LTP process. For the better off funding, there is that's based on a discrete piece of work. So to be at this moment, I can't answer your question about the previous plans, but we can take a commitment to come back.
What the Better Off funding enabled us to do was to pull forward something that was sitting much further out in the long-term plan. So we took the opportunity of taking that cash and bringing forward part of that project. Consequently, the plans for that the concept was reasonably, it's been around for a while. The team have been reviewing it and looking at it to make sure it's still appropriate for the growth that's occurred. And so that's why we're talking the LTP timing around this.
Good. Councillor Lydia Glidden.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question. I actually don't know if this is the right place to answer it. So if it's not, just say and direct me in the right place. I'm just looking at Ellesmere to Pines pipeline, and when we're talking about Upper Selwyn Huts and the scheme going in there, I still sit a little bit on the fence around that, and the fact that that's Doc's land that we are managing for them. And I know that there were some community meetings that went on, gauging them, because are they even supposed to be permanent residents there, and what is happening in that space? I think it's probably a difficult conversation to have, and this might not be the right place for it.
Yeah, I think it's a property infrastructure or infrastructure and property discussion. Yes, all valid points, and there's a lot of work going on just to understand what's happening down there.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Miller.
Just on the first point, Councillor Munt, it might be helpful to for the Lincoln Town Centre master plan to be given to the new councillors who haven't even seen it, probably.
Yes.
So there's probably a digital version somewhere that can be flicked on, or is it in? It won't be in diligent resource. I don't think so. We haven't had diligent, do we?
We haven't updated.
2016.
Yeah.
That could happen. To all councillors, that would be appreciated. Thank you very
So
much.
page 37, there's two. One's the Rolleston Town Centre. It says it's on hold. It talks about $4.42 million being spent on design, and then you've got the Prebbleton Reservoir, 2.17 million has been spent on design. It hasn't been tendered yet. Can you give me some feedback? Are we spending that sort of sum of money on design before we actually get anything physical built? I mean, in the case of the Prebbleton Reservoir, it's 40% of the cost has been incurred, and we haven't even laid a bit of concrete yet. Is that true?
I do believe there's some procurement that's on some long lead items that has gone on with that.
So there are physical items in stock. It's not all paper-based design and consenting. We're not spending 40% of our capital budget on. Is that what I'm hearing?
You'll have to check that, but Jen's right. There's been some long procurement items acquired. Some of the steel tanks and bits and pieces. So, correct. That's right. It's not as it says, as it's said here.
Not as bad as it looks.
Correct. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
And addressing the town centre piece, the piece that's on hold is around the town square and the arbors. There has been town square work, physical work.
So we haven't spent 4.42 million. Nothing.
Not on plans, no.
Not lost false paper.
No.
You did sort of
Good
just
pick up,
wandered there for a minute. I just wonder, I would like to bring something up like Lydia, but I think the more appropriate place is probably if we have if the chair allows in PX around the Ellesmere to Pines pipeline, if the chair allows, that might be helpful. And what was the last question I had? Again, it might be profit and more infrastructure, but if we've been talking about civil defence emergencies and the risks associated with it, if we were to have a large event, can we run Pines on its own steam? Will it run? Is there enough generation capacity to run the sewerage scheme for at least a limited time while we have a major event?
Yeah, it's quite a big question, Grant. So there's no ways of answering that, and I'll do my best. A lot of our resilience is actually being able to divert flows, and we've got storage. So when we connect Ellesmere, we can use the Ellesmere Pond. We've got Lincoln Pond. We can divert wastewater to Christchurch City as well. But there is significant generator capacity at Pines, so we can stumble along, if you like, with that.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. That's my questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Lyle, for the dad jokes. Thank you very much, Councillor Miller, for the good engaged questions. I think again it raises the importance of the reporting and perhaps a more in-depth reporting on what the costs are associated to. As Councillor Hassan's pointed out, the whata Waihora whataro, when will that be reported back? And I think it's September, October now that the business case will be presented according to the report here, and also the costs referred to include purchases and that type of thing. So to save a lot of the questions coming, perhaps it might pay to have more detail in the actual spend to date.
We'll look at that, but we also need to manage that, making these reports meaningful and not getting buried in detail, which is not adding value.
Thank you. Yep, also accepted. Councillors, that is the the major projects report. Councillor Hassan's going to move. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Miller, you've got your light on. Seconded. Or did you have a question?
I did miss a question, but I'm happy to leave it if you want to.
Oh, that's fine. You can please ask away.
Arfield pool refurbishment, additional fees of $60,000. But how are we going with that project? We know when we decided to do that project, it was sort of a knife edge as to whether we would actually do a new build or whether we'd refurbish. But we just incrementally seem to be creeping up on the refurbishment cost. Is that going the way you feel it should be going, that project?
That's a good question, Grant. I probably would need to refer to my colleagues in terms of progress on that. I think one of the observations that I can make is that the team are looking to mitigate those costs of refurbishment, and that I see as positive from a project performance perspective. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Miller. Move in the seconder. Councillor Hassan moved in. Councillor Miller second for that report. Those in favour, aye. Those against, there being none, carried. Thank you very much, councillors. Tab 10. Oh, Jenny again. Is that right? Long-term plan update.
Yeah. Okay, so long-term plan, I think the key points to keep you aware of at this point in time that what's the term I was going to say? Full noise is going on with planning and budgeting. With our teams at the moment, our asset managers have been working very hard for a very long time. We do have a date of internally the 16th of October for budgets coming in, and then we'll be what you'll see in the report as well. We have a series of workshops with council coming up in the next few months, building up to being able to provide you information to make informed decisions around the LTP and where you would like to go with that. So the first workshop we have coming up is the context setting workshop, which is coming up in September. So we'll be able to provide you or information around what's going on internally and externally within our environment. The next session coming up after that is looking at where you'd like to set the strategic direction for the RTP and what's going to be important for this one moving forward for our communities. And then we'll have another series of inputs, workshop of inputs, and then we will also, after that, having the activity management plans and the budgets coming forward so you can see what staff are recommending or thinking that needs to be done. So those workshops will go until December, and then moving into the new year, we have high-level timeframes outlined for our consultation process with our community, and detailed work's going underway as to how that might look, and we can obviously we'll be keeping you informed of that along the way. We do have a workshop around consulting with our community, which we'll do this year, so that you can have a view on what we propose and how you'd like to move forward with that, and that will come on the back of what's been done in the early engagement process. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Councillors, are there any questions regarding the report? Appreciate your work, staff's, all of your work into this huge mammoth task to put this together. So looking forward to the process and looking forward to the public's response. Thank you very much. Do I have a move into seconder for that report? Councillor Lyle, and seconder Councillor, Mayor Sam. Thank you very much. Are those in favour? Those against? None carried. Thank you. We now move to a resolution to exclude the public. So thank you very much for those that have online. We'll have a mover and a seconder for that. Councillor Hassan and Councillor Munch. Thank you very much for your attention.